Mr. Jim Paice to respond to some of those statements. Minister, the floor is yours.
I don't mind being booed, but do wait till I finish saying something. I've spoken, needless to say, many times in the House of Commons and Conservative Party conferences and all sorts of haranguing over the years, but this one takes the biscuit. So congratulations on you for coming, and thank you for coming, because I know that you probably have grave doubts about maybe my commitment or the government's commitment to your industry, indeed my industry, because I think it is, the whole farming industry is my industry. I've been part of it all my working life. And I know that for me to say I understand the trouble you're facing and the difficulties and the trauma probably sounds hollow, because you'll say, well, you don't know what it's really like. No, I don't. I'm not going to pretend I can be in your shoes, but I can tell you that I genuinely believe that I do understand the huge difficulties, and yes, I do know the costs, the true production costs, the great range of production costs that face you. And just for the record, I've been shopping. I know that this costs 49 pence. I also know that this costs 53 pence. I know which is better value for money. I know which costs far more to produce. I know which is more nutritious and more important to the British economy. Because dairying is still the largest single enterprise in the agricultural economy of our nation. And for generations it has, and I believe will remain, the backbone of British farming. And yes, in my time I have milked cows myself. Not admittedly for some years, but there are not many ministers who could stand up and say they've ever done it. And I have said several times over the last 2 years, and I repeat today, that I believe the dairy industry in this country has a huge amount to offer not only the people who work in it, but the British economy. And I base that on 2 reasons. I was taught at Agricultural College, and it's still true, that with the possible exception of Ireland, we can grow grass more effectively and more cheaply in this country than anywhere else in Europe. And secondly, because of the increasing global demand for dairy products. I was, as some know, in China a couple of months ago. I took with me a couple of people from the Institute of Grocery Distribution. They did a survey. They visited 18 retail outlets in China, some British-owned, some Chinese-owned. And they found Dutch produce, dairy produce, Danish dairy produce, Irish dairy produce. British, no. And yet the Chinese growing prosperity. They consume about a quarter of the global average of dairy products per capita, and there's 1.4 billion of them, don't forget. So any small increase in consumption, and it is rising all the time, is a massive marketplace, and we are not there. And yes, I am angry that the Danes and the Dutch and the Irish are all trying to increase milk production. They want quotas to go now so that they can increase production, so that they can target those markets. Yet here in the UK, we're just about plateauing in terms of our milk production, and it's way, way below quota. And therefore the question has to be, why are we like that? What is going wrong? Well, we know that we have a market that has always been different because of our huge liquid milk market. Originally, doorstep delivery, still happening in some cases. I've actually got a milkman in my constituency, actually one of my councillors. He rang me yesterday to say that, needless to say, a lot of people have rung me in the last 24 hours with the price of milk. But he rang me to say the delivered price on your doorstep in the town of Soham, where he lives, is 64 pence a pint. But because of that concentration on the liquid market, we have lost sight of the global opportunities for the manufactured processed product. Our processors fight each other over the right to bottle for the supermarkets, and you've heard from Myrig the issue of the cream and how that fed into the current crisis. But the liquid market is static. There's no growth in it. We're all drinking as much milk as we're likely ever to. Small amount of population growth may increase it marginally. But for the processed market, it is massive, it is out there, and it is in here too. We've got £1.2 billion trade deficit in processed dairy products. Yogurts, cheeses, butters, all coming in mainly from Europe, but also some from overseas. And that is something that our processors should be targeting much more, facing markets that can grow rather than concentrating on a static market. But I need to emphasize, and I know you won't like this, that governments and ministers cannot fix prices, and frankly, I don't believe that we should either. But there are things that we can do, and I want to go through a couple of them. I know that we're not really here to talk about it, but I can't talk to dairy farmers and indeed beef farmers without referring to TB, the blight of so many of you. All I can assure you, without going into all the issues, I'm absolutely determined to do everything we possibly can to rid our country of that blight of TB. It's going to take a very long while. It will take much longer than I will be in office, however many days or hours or weeks or months that may be. But I'm determined to get on top of it. We are introducing a grocery code adjudicator. The legislation is before Parliament now, and it's because I believe in the marketplace to set prices that I believe in that adjudicator, because the market has to work fairly and transparently, and that is the role of the adjudicator. And we are reducing regulation wherever possible. We're implementing the recommendations of the McDonald Commission, and in dairying, of course, we've already got the relaxation that if you are part of assured farm standards, then you'll only be inspected once every 10 years for dairy hygiene. And I can also add a couple of other things today. We consulted earlier in the year whether to end the exemption for slurry stores over 20 years old from having to comply with the SAFO regulation. We've decided not to end that exemption. Instead, we will work with the NFU to find a better way of addressing the issues. Secondly, in that same consultation, we considered making the whole of England a nitrate vulnerable zone. We will not do that either. There will be some localised alterations to NVZs, and the details will be announced shortly, but there will be a net overall reduction in the number of farms affected. But let's also be clear, reducing nitrate pollution is still of major importance, and I'm not going to let up on our efforts on that, and nor should you. But of course, the big issue today, despite one or two disparaging remarks you've heard, is the voluntary code of practice, about what actually goes into the contracts that you have with your processors. And I want to emphasize that I believe a voluntary code is better than the possibility of a compulsory contract under the European regulation. And Myrig, I have checked again. Despite your list of previous legislation, there is no powers which would allow us, check with our lawyers, there are no powers which would allow us to go beyond what is in that compulsory contract under the EU regulation. And that would have the problem, first it would be imposed. Now some of you may want that, but anything that imposed creates resistance and people don't like it. That's part of it. The second part of it, of course, is that we could only impose those things which the European dairy package allows us to impose. Whereas a voluntary code, firstly, will show agreement between the two sides, and that would be a great achievement in itself. And that agreement would then allow us to build up some trust that has been lost, and you've heard about it already this afternoon. That trust has been lost and it has to be rebuilt. Thirdly, a voluntary code can be reviewed. If bits aren't working properly, we can review it and with agreement change it. And fourthly, and very importantly, it can include aspects which are not allowed within the European dairy package, such as the issue of exclusivity. Now, I was very disappointed that the code was not agreed by the first anniversary of my public call for one. I said I would act, and I promised to do that, and I have done so again literally this morning. I've met with both sides, the union, the Farmers' Union and the NFUS, and with the processors and their representatives. We're almost there now with the heads of agreement. Never have we been closer than we are literally now or in an hour and a half ago. Tantalizingly close. Indeed, for a brief moment, I hoped I was going to be able to tell you we'd got there. We're not quite. It's down to just 2 or 3 words. We're tantalizingly close, and I can promise you I will do all I can to deliver it. And I must emphasize that both sides have moved a very long way from their original entrenched positions. But if we can get this code, it's not some sort of compromise or second choice. It's actually, in my view, by far the better way forward than we could ever achieve. But it's not just about the code. We need to go beyond the code. And you've heard people talking about some of these issues, but it includes everybody in that food supply chain, including the consumers, all the retailers, whether or not they're the ones that Myrig named who provide higher prices and aligned contracts. That's for their liquid milk. Where do they get their yogurts and their cheese and their own brand stuff manufactured? They need to answer that. They're the other ones, including the discounters, one of whom I'm told is now offering 4 pints for 99 pence. Where do they expect their milk and their dairy products to come from, especially their liquid milk, if you guys all go out of business? They're the consumers who need to understand and explain to the farmers here, why are they prepared to pay more for water than they are for milk? And the processors need also to answer this question: why not grow demand and face those huge opportunities I've talked about, rather than constantly battling over bottling? And it involves all of you too. Are you absolutely sure you've done everything to reduce your production costs? You see how easy it is to lose friends. But I'm telling you, if you think that shouting me down is going to help you, forget it. I'm not afraid to tell you that I have seen numerous dairy farmers' figures over the last couple of years. There is a vast range of production costs. I'm not pointing fingers. All I'm telling you is that there is room, in some cases, many cases, to reduce them further. That is all I'm telling you. That is why I say to you that this whole issue involves everybody from the top to the bottom of the production chain. And I'm saying to you too, why is it your industry allows yourself to be treated like this. The European Union dairy package already allows any producer organisation to have 33% of the market. Yet none of ours in this country have more than 11%. The only people who can work together and create bigger producer organisations are farmers themselves. And that brings me to my final point. It brings me to my final point. Because we in the government believe that the best way forward is for farmers to work together to have the clout in the marketplace that you deserve and are entitled to. That is why a little while ago the Prime Minister announced that we are making some money available to help producer groups of producers, including perhaps those in the aligned sectors, but to work together to develop your markets and to invest in innovation and competitiveness. That extra money will help. It's not the only answer. There is no simple answer. Now, I know you would like me to fix prices. Some of you go back to years when government intervened in everything and government set prices for everything. Those days are not coming back. What we can do and what we are determined to do is to do everything we can to make the market work more fairly, to balance that power in the marketplace that we've talked about. And I can and will continue to use my position to bang heads together, to encourage, cajole and persuade the whole of the chain to accept the responsibility for this situation and to find a better way for our industry to flourish. Because I end by saying, as I began, I really do believe that there is a great future for dairying, not just in the domestic marketplace, but overseas as well. But it will not happen by simply pointing fingers, blaming one person or another. Every part of the chain is part of that future. Every part of the chain has a responsibility to achieve that future. And I will do whatever I can to help to achieve that.